morning. It is November 10th, coming to you live from Seoul. We start with the stories making the headlines at this hour. The White House says Israel has agreed to pause military operations for 4 hours each day and open a second evacuation corridor from northern Gaza. This comes as Israeli forces move deeper into Gaza, and Prime Minister Netanyahu once again says no ceasefire unless all the hostages are released. South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin met U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Seoul. The top diplomats called for China's constructive role in dealing with Russia and North Korea military ties. South Korea's Booker Prize-winning author Han Kang has won another prestigious award, the French Prix Médicis Award for Foreign Literature, with her novel I Do Not Bid Farewell. The White House says Israel has agreed to pause military operations for 4 hours each day and open a second evacuation corridor from northern Gaza. This comes as Prime Minister Netanyahu once again says no ceasefire unless all the hostages are released. Our Choi Soo-hyung has the latest.
The White House has said Israel has agreed to make daily 4-hour humanitarian pauses in northern Gaza to enable civilians to find safe areas. The pauses will start on Thursday. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said Israel makes its own decisions, not the U.S., and there will be no military operations in the region during the pause. The Israeli military will announce each day's 4-hour humanitarian pause and its location at least 3 hours in advance. Moreover, Kirby said Israel will open a coastal road as a second corridor for civilians heading south. According to the Israeli official on Thursday, after a first corridor along Gaza's main north-south highway was opened several times this week, more than 80,000 people used it to flee northern Gaza. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that the humanitarian pauses are not a ceasefire and they could only come with the release of all hostages taken by Hamas.
There will be no ceasefire without the release of our hostages. Anything else is futile.
On the same day, Israel Defense Forces spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari uploaded on social media that Israel's ground operation is ongoing in the military quarter, the main base of Hamas inside Gaza City. The IDF said Israeli infantry and armored units entered the zone to destroy Hamas facilities, killing around 50 Hamas members. They found tunnels and weapons facilities and discovered Hamas military bases and command centers. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said the IDF is developing new ways to enter or destroy tunnels without harming hostages, and the fighting will not stop until all hostages are rescued safely. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
South Korean Foreign Minister Park Jin met U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken here in Seoul. The top diplomats called for China's constructive role in dealing with Russia and North Korea's military ties. Bae Eun-ji has more.
Top diplomats of South Korea and the U.S. on Thursday called on China to play a constructive role in dealing with North Korea's deepening military ties with Russia. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who arrived in South Korea the day before, warned that the situation is very concerning after holding a meeting with Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin. In a joint press conference, Blinken explained that the U.S. is seeing a two-way street when it comes to ties between Pyongyang and Moscow.
We're seeing the DPRK provide military equipment to Russia for pursuing its aggression against Ukraine, but we're also seeing Russia provide technology and support to the DPRK for its own military programs.
He also stressed the importance of China's role in pulling North Korea back from what he called the regime's irresponsible and dangerous behavior.
China has a unique relationship with North Korea. As a result of that relationship, it has real influence, and we do look to China to use that influence to play a constructive role in pulling North Korea back from this irresponsible and dangerous behavior.
Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin also said it will not be beneficial to China's national interest if tensions in the East Asia region continue to escalate due to arms cooperation between Russia and North Korea.
South Korea and the US will work together to call on China to address concerns from neighboring countries as well as the international community so that it can play its role to make sure this kind of dangerous deal does not happen.
Ahead of his meeting with Park, Blinken also met President Yoon over lunch. Yoon said now is a time when U.S. leadership is becoming increasingly important due to instability in the Middle East, along with the issue of North Korea and the war in Ukraine, and vowed to work closely with Washington. In response, Blinken said U.S. foreign policy remains focused on the Indo-Pacific region and that Washington intends to further strengthen its strategic partnership with Seoul. Peunji, Arirang News.
The security chiefs of Seoul and Washington have agreed to push for a three-way meeting with their Japanese counterpart within this year. The presidential office said Thursday that National Security Advisor Cho Tae-yong held a phone call with his U.S. counterpart Jake Sullivan, following up on fostering trilateral cooperation with Tokyo amid North Korea's nuclear threat and other challenges to regional and economic security. The two officials said they would aim to hold a trilateral meeting of security advisors within the year and hold the first meeting of Seoul and Washington's dialogue for next generation emerging and core technology as agreed by their leaders in April. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit is coming up next week in San Francisco. Leaders of APEC nations will focus their discussions on regional cooperation, on climate change, technology, and supply chains. But there is also much anticipation over high-stakes sideline meetings. For more on what we can expect, we're joined by Han Shuttle, Professor of Political Science at Yonsei University. Welcome to the show, Professor.
Good morning, Kang. Nice to see you.
Good morning. Well, first of all, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol will be among the leaders attending. What does South Korea have to offer and gain from the summit as it seeks to expand its role in the global green and digital transition fields?
Well, it certainly has technological capacity to offer, I think, and also some export revenue to gain. Just yesterday in the news, we heard that South Korea's expected economic growth for next year has been cut to 2.2%. This is from a KDI report released yesterday. And of course, the country was hoping for a little higher than that, at least 2.3%. So it's very slow growth these days for the South Korean economy. And I'd expect President Yoon to then do as much as he can do to offset this through some external partnerships. And that's fortuitous, actually, given that at the APEC conference this year, one of the big themes is green economy, or clean economy, as many countries are calling it. And the U.S. is also going to be announcing several bilateral initiatives at APEC. The Biden administration is going to be talking about some arrangements with participating countries related to its larger Indo-Pacific economic framework. So again, clean economy, green economy, digital technology, these are areas where we could possibly see something emerging of interest to South Korea along these sorts of lines.
Okay, well, there's also much attention on a possible summit between President Yoon Suk-yeol and Chinese President Xi Jinping. What are the prospects of such a meeting and the possible outcome?
Well, it would be a good idea, Kang, and I think it's fairly likely, especially since President Yoon has focused so much of his foreign policy this year, as we well know, on Japan and the United States, and comparatively little on China. Yet it's very important, of course, for Korea to maintain a good relationship with China. Yoon and Xi met at APEC last year in Bali. It was a fairly general meeting. Their points of emphasis at the time were the need to maintain strategic communication, in their words. They also talked about mutual trust. I guess I'd expect something similar this year with the two leaders. And of course, as one of your reports just mentioned a moment ago, one concern is North Korea, always, of course, a perennial concern, but this year more so since North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had the recent summit with Vladimir Putin, and North Korea seems now to be kind of contributing to the Russian war in Ukraine. That's something that I think concerns both South Korea and China. So I would think that would be discussed as well, at least behind the scenes. And we might even hear some sort of report or statement regarding that after they meet. But again, it's hard to say.
Well, President Yoon is also expected to deliver a joint lecture with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. What is the significance of such an event? Normalizing Seoul-Tokyo relations, and what is likely to be their key message?
Right. So this is based on widely disseminated yet still unconfirmed news reports that this event will apparently take place on the 17th at Stanford University, which is, of course, one of the most illustrious universities in the United States. It's located just outside San Francisco. It's often seen as a kind of springboard for so many companies in the high-tech sector. So I think both leaders will be quite keen to visit Stanford and to meet together there. And as you suggest, Kang, I think the two of them will say, especially if they talk at the same event, they'll try to send a message that a new era has arrived between South Korea and Japan. And I would expect they might also say something to the effect that East Asia's democracies are sticking together. Of course, Yoon and Kishida have met a lot this year. They most recently met in September at the G20 summit in New Delhi. Whether they would say anything that's groundbreaking or that charts yet another further step in cooperation between the two countries at this meeting, I'm not necessarily sure. I think they might end up reiterating what they have already been saying. I would actually hope that Prime Minister Kishida would take a few additional steps with regard to try to further public support in South Korea for reconciliation between the two countries. I personally think more is needed from Japan on this side, but we shall see going forward.
Well, we will have to wait and see on that front. Meanwhile, there is also an expected summit between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. What is at stake in this highly anticipated meeting?
Yeah, there's a lot at stake here. And in some ways, this is perhaps the most significant two-way meeting we're going to see at the APEC Summit between national leaders. I think for one thing, Biden and Xi will try to stabilize a tense relationship at a tense moment for world politics. As you know, we're clearly in a new era of great power rivalry at the moment, and the potential for further conflict in East Asia is certainly high. There's a lot of chatter about that kind of concern these days at conferences. In fact, of course, China's claims to Taiwan and the unresolved, uneasy peace between the two Koreas are constant flashpoints in both regional politics here and world politics. So Xi and Biden want to lower, I think, the risk of any potential crisis in the region. I think ultimately the two leaders realize that their two countries are highly interdependent and can't afford any kind of escalation into conflict. And regarding the U.S. and China also, there's some bad blood still over the U.S. downing in February of the alleged spy balloon from China that floated over the United States. You might remember the news stories about that at the time. So I think the two leaders might try to smooth that over, and they might also talk about some of the accusations that we've been hearing on the part of the U.S. and its allies. We heard this especially at the G7 meeting in the spring in Japan, that Beijing is guilty of economic coercion, in the words of the U.S. and several of its allies, pressuring other countries to follow policies of its own, China's policies of its own. So I think the two leaders might try to sort that out. And lastly, Xi will be eager to talk to the U.S. and also its partners at this meeting, because China recently reported its first ever quarterly deficit in foreign direct investment in recent years. So China's trying to get its own economic engines revved up again, and I think they'll be using the summit as an opportunity to try to do just that.
All right, Professor, we will have to wrap it up here. Always thank you for your insight.
Great. Thank you for having me, Kang. Take care.
U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said that policymakers are encouraged by the slowing pace of inflation, but added they're not sure whether they have done enough to keep the momentum going. Speaking to an International Monetary Fund audience in Washington on Thursday, Powell said more work could be needed in the ongoing battle against inflation, hinting at more monetary tightening in the future. He also noted that the U.S. Central Bank is aware that the stronger than expected growth could undermine the fight against inflation, a warrant of response from monetary policy. With a target goal of 2% rate of inflation, Powell said there is a long way to go as annual inflation levels are currently at 3.7%. South Korea's stock market has seen large fluctuations this week as the country reimposed a short-selling ban. How will the measure shape the market while it remains in place until the end of next June? Our Moon-Hye-Ryun explains.
On Sunday afternoon, the South Korean government announced a temporary ban on short selling when investors trade with borrowed shares. The reason cited was to weed out naked shorting, which is an illegal practice of selling shares that might not actually exist, by making improvements to the current shorting system. Just a few weeks ago, the country's financial watchdog imposed record-high fines on 2 international investment banks for this practice. This is the 4th time that short selling's been prohibited, and the Financial Services Committee cited global economic uncertainty as another reason. The very first day of trade after the announcement showed the country's benchmark Kospi surging to its largest one-day rise in over 3 years, as well as a hike in the tech-heavy Kosdaq. This surge led to the activation of the Kosdaq sidecar limit, which is activated when there is a rise of more than 6% compared to the previous close. Over the next few days, stocks saw consecutive declines as foreign investors turned into net sellers, but the decline showed signs of slowing across Tuesday and Wednesday before rising again on Thursday. Some analysts say that this volatility is a result of foreign investors leaving the market.
There's a possibility that as institutions and foreign investors are unable to short sell, they also won't be able to keep up the same proportion of going long and therefore damage the soundness of the financial market.
Others say it's less about foreign investors and more about the psychological effects of the ban on individual investors, meaning that the market will stabilize soon.
I think the market rise in the first day was more psychological than real because so many individual investors had negative feelings about the market from the short selling.
The government is using this period to make improvements to level the playing field between domestic retail investors and institutional and foreign investors. There are also concerns about the ban preventing the upgrade of South Korea's stock market by Morgan Stanley Capital International to developed market status. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho addressed these concerns, saying that the government will continue to work on reforms until next June. Moon-Hye-Ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea's Booker Prize-winning author Kang has won another prestigious award, the French Prix Médicis Award for Foreign Literature, with her novel I Do Not Bid Farewell. Lee Sing-jae has more.
Famed South Korean author Kang won a prestigious French literary award on Thursday for her 2021 novel I Do Not Bid Farewell. Her novel was chosen as the winner of the Prix Médicis Award for Foreign Literature. The Prix Médicis Award, founded in 1958, is considered one of the top literary awards honoring fictional work in France. In 1970, the foreign literature category was added to award books published in translation. Published 5 years after Han won the International Booker Prize for The Vegetarian, her latest award-winning novel describes the events surrounding the April 3, 1948 incident on South Korea's Jeju Island from the perspective of 3 women. The government of the day suppressed civilian protests against U.S. military rule, leading to the deaths of up to 30,000 people. The French edition of the novel was published in August. Han was shortlisted for the award in October and becomes the first Korean author to have won this award. She was previously nominated for Prix Médicis in 2017 for her 2011 novel Greek Lessons. Lee Sing-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Si-young, and we'll now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Asia, where Myanmar's military-led government is under threat from a series of major coordinated offensives in the country's northeast Shan state. This comes as an alliance of 3 ethnic insurgent armies and other anti-government groups took control of military outposts as well as roads used for overland trade with China. The junta installed President former General Mint Sue said Thursday that the country is at risk of breaking apart if the government continues to fail to manage the latest wave of violence. Attacks by insurgent groups in Shan state began on October 27th, with the government responding with air and ground strikes that left thousands fleeing from their homes. Representatives from the alliance, which includes the Arakan Army and the Taang National Liberation Army, said the attacks were to put an end to an oppressive military dictatorship. They also said they wish to destroy cyber scamming centers operating in the Shan state region that reportedly fund Myanmar's military. The current military government seized power in February 2021 by staging a coup against the then President Aung San Suu Kyi. Now moving over to Europe, where veteran Spanish politician Alejandro Vidal Quadras has been shot in the face in broad daylight on a central Madrid street. The 78-year-old right-wing lawmaker was shot around 1:30 p.m. local time on Thursday near his home and is recovering in hospital. Vidal Quadras was shot once by an individual wearing a black helmet, who then fled the scene on a motorbike driven by a getaway driver. Police said they would not rule out any motive for the shooting, adding that links to an Iranian opposition group, the exiled Mujahideen Akhalq, were being investigated. Vidal Quadras was a long-time member of Spain's right-wing Popular Party and has previously served as its regional leader in Catalonia, as well as having been a long-time member of the European Parliament. In the US, surgeons in New York announced on Thursday that they had completed the first successful transplant of an entire eyeball. 46-year-old Aaron James from Arkansas suffered a work accident in June 2021 involving a high-voltage power line that destroyed most of his face and left eye. He also lost his left arm in the incident. Despite James having no sight in the eye following the operation in May, surgeons at NYU Langone Health said the eyes look remarkably healthy and may yet be capable of transmitting neurological signals to the brain. Team leader Dr. Eduardo Rodriguez called the transplant a major step forward. In Colombia, footballer Luis Diaz's father, who was kidnapped 12 days ago, has been released. Both of the Liverpool forward's parents were kidnapped on October 28th by armed men on motorbikes at a gas station in their hometown of Barrancas, Colombia. His mother, however, was rescued within hours by the police. The Colombian government said last week that Luis Diaz's parents were kidnapped by the ELN, National Liberation Army guerrilla group. The ELN's leadership later acknowledged the kidnapping, admitted it was a mistake, and ordered the father's release. The 26-year-old footballer, who joined Liverpool last year, is considered one of the key players on Colombia's national team as well.
Good morning. It's amazing what Mother Nature is capable of. It has gotten so much colder this morning. Afternoon highs will also go down more than 10 degrees Celsius lower than yesterday. Then weekend morning commuters in central parts of the country need to brace for sub-zero temperatures. The winter chill has not arrived in the southern parts of the country yet. They are waking up to a warmer morning in the low teens. But instead of a chill, southern provinces are having a rainy start to Friday. Expect to see 5 to 10 millimeters of rainfall through the first half of the day. After the rain lets up, the skies will clear, but will need to stay bundled for the afternoon. Seoul sees a high of 7 degrees, Gwangju at 11 degrees, but Gyeongju, Busan, Jeju will be warmer at 14 and 16 degrees respectively. Stay warm through early next week. Then we can expect temperatures to return to normal in the middle of next week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That is all for today. Thanks for watching.